Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring how the terrifying, absolutely deadlocked conditions of World War I trench warfare birthed an entirely new and deeply feared class of soldier, the modern sniper. Now, sure, sharpshooters had certainly existed in conflicts before the Great War, but the static, grinding reality of the trenches, that caused them to evolve into something horrific, systematic, and completely unprecedented.
To really grasp the scale of this threat, I want you to put yourself there. Imagine sitting in a trench, just doing your daily duty, and knowing that your section is losing 5 men every single day to a completely invisible enemy. That was the horrific reality the British faced in the first year and a half of trench warfare. A soldier who thought he was perfectly safe, maybe just peeking his forehead over the earthen sandbags for a second, was dead before he even heard the sound of the shot. It was a literal reign of terror that sparked immense anxiety across the entire front line.
So, why then? Well, the deadlock of the Great War forced four specific elements together all at once. It's like a deadly puzzle. First, you needed good telescopic sights to see all the way across no man's land. Second, camouflage to stay hidden from thousands of searching eyes. Third, organized training to actually systematize the killing. And finally, of course, static trench lines that provided endless stationary targets. Having all four of these factors happen at the exact same time is what evolved ordinary soldiers into something incredibly lethal. That brings us to part one, Germany's reign of terror. Let's look at the beginning of the Trench War, where the German army established a terrifying, completely one-sided dominance. At the start of the war, there was just this massive technological gap between the two sides. Germany already possessed the most advanced optical industry in the world. This gave them high-quality scopes that the Allies could literally only dream of. Pair that world-class glass with a deep cultural background in hunting, and you have a perfect storm. The Allies, meanwhile, they had to improvise, desperately scrambling for precise hunting rifles and whatever optical sights civilians back home could generously donate to the cause. And the dedication of these early German hunters was frankly chilling. A German sniper would creep out into no man's land at dawn, slowly settle into a hidden position, blend perfectly into his surroundings, and then lie completely, agonizingly motionless for an entire day. He'd just carefully study the trench section opposite to him, watching for a shadow behind the parapet, or maybe a tiny puff of cigarette smoke, just waiting for an enemy soldier to make one single wrong step. Now, while they definitely targeted anyone who made themselves visible, even guys just grabbing supplies or fetching water, snipers systematically hunted down soldiers whose deaths would hurt the most. They prioritized officers first, followed by artillery observers, machine gunners, and messengers. Taking out these key figures wasn't just about adding to the body count, it actively degraded the enemy's ability to communicate and actually fight back. Which leads into part two, the Allied counterattack. Because it actually took months for the British High Command to finally admit they weren't just facing a string of lucky shots. They realized they were up against a new, systematic form of warfare, and initially, they had absolutely no answer for it. And just as the Allies were desperately scrounging for civilian hunting optics and issuing these incredibly crude stopgap sights, the German snipers escalated the arms race. They started using thick steel plates with small loopholes cut into them, so a German sniper could peek his rifle through this tiny slot, fire across the battlefield, and remain almost completely protected from any standard return fire. The Allied response to those impenetrable steel plates, it was almost absurd. The British literally brought in massive elephant guns, weapons originally designed for hunting big game in Africa. The goal was to punch massive rounds straight through the steel, and, well, it actually worked. But the monstrous recoil from firing such a massive weapon from a prone position was so intense that it often snapped the shooter's collarbone. The real turning point, though, arrived when the Allies finally fitted their standard-issue short magazine Lee Enfield rifles with proper telescopic sights. Furthermore, they set up the first actual Army schools of sniping. By institutionalizing this training, they transformed sniping from a rare improvised skill into a highly effective regular part of the military machine. Moving on to part three, Gallipoli, the high ground. Let's jump to 1915, where this sniping war reached an entirely new level of intensity against Germany's ally, the Ottoman Empire. The geography of Gallipoli made things absolutely terrifying. The Ottomans held the high ground over the Allied trenches, and the lines were so unbelievably close they were literally within hand grenade range. The Allied positions were in plain view, making the Turkish snipers insanely deadly. They racked up immense kill counts and successfully targeted high-ranking officials. They even took out Australian Major General Bridges while he was inspecting frontline positions. It proved that absolutely no rank was safe. Because just raising your head meant certain, instant death in these incredibly tight quarters. Soldiers in the trenches had to rely heavily on periscopes and mirrors just to look around. Eventually, this forced the Allies to invent the periscope rifle. It was a brilliant contraption, really, allowing a soldier to aim and fire his weapon over the parapet while keeping his entire body safely hunkered down in the trench. Part 4. Psychological Warfare and Brutality. Beyond all these incredible leaps in technology, we have to look impartially at the immense psychological toll of this warfare and the brutal tactics that often stripped the humanity right out of both sides. In the pursuit of maximizing enemy casualties, some snipers used disturbingly creative and ruthless tactics. For instance, a sniper might intentionally wound a soldier, perhaps shooting him in the stomach to ensure a slow, agonizing demise. This obviously sent a terrifying message, but practically, it baited the wounded man's comrades. His friends were left with a horrific choice: listen to him suffer and do nothing, or step out into the open to save him and risk getting killed themselves. The sheer intimacy of the kill weighed heavily on the shooters, too. Watching a target's face clearly through a magnifying scope for a long time, only to end his life while he fetched water, smoked a cigarette, or simply went to the toilet, that is vastly different from firing blindly into a massive charge. Because the victims couldn't even see their attacker, let alone fight back, many surviving snipers ended up suffering from severe shell shock, what we of course recognize today as PTSD. And because of this terrifying hidden nature of killing, snipers became the absolute most hated men on the battlefield. By unspoken rule, they effectively lost the privilege of surrendering like regular soldiers. If a man was captured holding a scoped rifle, the best-case scenario was being summarily shot right on the spot. In the worst-case scenarios, the outcomes were far more drawn out and gruesome, ensuring that ultimately there was no option for an open casket. Part 5. The Art of Deadly Deception. To survive, hunt, and counter-hunt in this incredibly hostile environment, armies turned to theatrical levels of deception to try and outsmart the enemy's snipers. It was actually the French who first seriously pioneered the concept of camouflage, which is a French word, literally meaning to disguise. This concept quickly spiraled into an array of truly mind-boggling, highly creative tactics designed to hide snipers right in front of the enemy's eyes, out in the desolate landscape of no man's land. Armies would spot a battered tree still standing in the wasteland, right? Then they'd construct a hollow, fake replica of it. Under the cover of nighttime artillery bombardments to mask the noise, they'd chop down the real tree and swap in the fake one, hiding an observer or sniper inside for the morning. They did the exact same thing with dead horses, swapping a real rotting corpse for a hollow, fake one. In some cases, they would even rig the hidden sniper inside with a live telephone wire running all the way back to his trench so he could report enemy movements in real time. This whole thing became an escalating game of cat and mouse. Soldiers created these incredibly detailed dummy heads, outfitting them with a tube so a guy down in the trench could draw air to make a cigarette in the dummy's mouth actually smoke. Then, they'd slowly raise this head over the trench to bait a sniper into shooting it. Once shot, they'd examine the exact angle of the bullet hole and draw a line on a map. By repeating this with multiple dummy heads in different spots, they used a method called triangulation. Where those lines crossed on the map, that was the exact location of the hidden sniper, allowing them to call down precise mortar fire to just obliterate his hiding spot. Part 6. The End of Trench Sniping. By 1917 and 1918, the landscape of the sniper war had completely shifted. The British, Canadian, and Australian snipers were now working in modern, highly effective two-man teams, a shooter and an observer, and they had completely caught up to and surpassed their enemies. At the same time, the grinding war of attrition had severely depleted the ranks of the irreplaceable German snipers. By 1918, even the arriving Americans were sending their absolute best shots to British schools to learn these highly perfected techniques. But, just as quickly as it developed, the golden age of the trench sniper faded. The 1918 German Spring Offensive finally broke the static trench stalemate. The conflict rapidly shifted back into open, mobile combat. The ideal killing ground just vanished. There was suddenly no need and no opportunity to lie in a concealed position for days staring at an entrenched enemy. So, sniping faded into a deep sleep, waiting to be awakened by the next global conflict some years later. Which leaves us with a haunting final thought. These snipers were conditioned by the trenches, their minds and bodies literally molded to endure days of motionless isolation, watching human life end intimately through a pane of glass. When the lines finally broke and warfare once again relied on chaotic, constant motion, what happened to the deeply specialized, deeply traumatized soldier who had spent years learning how to sit perfectly still?